Welcome to Book Watch, the podcast where pages meet screens. I'm your host, Sarah-Daye. Each week, I'll be joined by amazing guests to dive deep into the world of adaptations, comparing beloved books with their cinematic counterparts. From faithful retellings to bold reimaginings, we'll break down what worked, what didn't, and what made each adaptation unforgettable. Whether you're a bookworm, a movie buff, or both, you are in the right place. So grab your bookmark, grab your popcorn, and let's watch some books. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to part 2 of the Hunger Games. I am here with Scotty Sinclair again. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Good to be back.
And on today's episode, part 2 is where we dive into the key plot points of the story and how well the film adapted those key plot points. So diving right in, we open up with an introduction to the seam and the reaping itself. And I believe in the movie, Prim wakes up from a dream from a nightmare. In the book, I think it was Katniss that woke up from a dream and then saw her sister sleeping with her mom.
Correct. In the book, it's Katniss that wakes up. And if I'm not mistaken, in the movie, actually, even before all of that, we get the opening title sequences that describes the process of the reaping and the history of Panem. And then even before that, you get like an interview with Seneca Crane and Caesar Flickerman, which is right off the bat, having just reread the book and watched this movie for the first time in a long time. I was like, that is a departure.
Yes. Yes, it is. But again, using the game show as a way to tell the story and give that exposition. And that's exactly how they introduced the movie. And so,
Certainly.
And they continue that on from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in the book, we're introduced to Gale through the hunting, and then after they're done hunting, we meet the Hob, which is like the underground market.
Right.
And we meet some characters. We also meet Madge in the book, who has been cut from the film, who is the mayor's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to talk about this introduction and meeting all these characters?
Well, just focusing on Madge a little bit, it's worth mentioning that Madge is actually the one that gives her Mockingjay pin that becomes her symbol of rebellion, right? So certainly a departure there as well. But the other part that was in the book about Madge's character that I kind of appreciated is Katniss's perspective on her. So when she first talks about her, she's really just like refers to her as more of an acquaintance, like someone that she has lunch with because they're both loners. But as this process of the reaping and her becoming volunteer and saying goodbye to everyone, the fact that Madge does come see her and says goodbye, and there's that sequence earlier on where Gale kind of takes a dig at her and Katniss kind of comes to her defense. You just really do realize that while Katniss is a person that kind of holds people at arm's length, Madge was a friend for her. So I think that's just, something that the novel does that unfortunately the movie could not do. That it just showing that Katniss is capable of warmness, even though it's just a little different for her, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I think also the emotion behind the pin is taken away. I mean, Prim will give it to her later in the film, but it means something else for her to be given this as a gift instead of finding it and giving it to Prim and then having Prim give it back to her.
Right.
So it changes the meaning of the pin a little bit in the film.
Does. Yeah. Yeah. And then characters like Greasy Say or Greasy Sigh, however that's pronounced. I didn't listen to the audiobook.
I think is how Greasy Say.
Okay. She's not a big deal. I can do without that character. Doesn't do a big deal. But then I do think about Peeta's father, who's not even named in the book, but he is the baker, right?
Right.
He was a character I missed because I just felt like his inclusion did a lot for Peeta. Just to give some context there, I'll save it for later, but some of the things he reveals about his, growing up with Katniss's mom and everything like that, how that kind of endeared him to that family from the get-go and Peeta by extension.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about the reaping and how it's explained and how it's portrayed in the film and the differences or similarities.
I thought they did a pretty faithful job, in terms of the way it was described with the stage and some of the proceedings. I did think that I imagine more people there in the book,
Mm-hmm.
because I think they do a better job of like describing District 12. It's not limited to the Hob and the Seam. There's actually like a section of town where things are a little bit nicer. So there's actually like somewhat of a class system and a caste system within
Yes.
District 12 that you don't really get to see. So I feel like they just kind of showed the bare minimum there. They just showed this is clearly a very poor, blue collar uh, kind of society. And in terms of making it seem really desperate, I think making it a little bit smaller did make it feel more intimate and tight knit. And so that was a departure that it did work for me.
Yeah, and I liked seeing all of the faces of the younger children and
Sure.
how really dire the situation is. Like, this is a very intense and scary situation that they're in, and I think all of these extras really portrayed that sense of fear really well.
Yeah. Now they choose to not introduce Haymitch at all in the
Yeah.
film adaptation in this part, and I think the reason that they chose to do that, at least in my mind, is like he's pretty comical in the book, right? He's like, tripping over himself, messing with Effie and stuff like that. So it's kind of a source of comic relief, where I don't think they wanted to do that in the movie. They really wanted to hone in on
Mhm.
the heartbreaking nature and desperate nature of the reaping. So in the moment, I was like, huh, why are they waiting so late to introduce us to Haymitch? But
Mhm.
I do understand the choice, and I do think it's another effective choice in terms of just making that scene really, really sad.
Yes, I agree, and I want to add that even like from the opening of the film, after we get the juxtaposition and the interview with Caesar earlier, and we cut to the scene, and we're seeing all these really dirty, sad people,
Hmm.
and we don't really leave that again until they enter the train,
Hmm.
and we have that contrast. But I think even the coloring and it just really sets the mood and the tone for not only what their daily life is like, but also what the reaping is like. So then we get Prim, her name being called, and then Katniss volunteering, and then, of course, Peta's name being drawn. And pretty similar from page to screen, I would say. How about you?
Yeah, I can't think of any major differences that come to mind. I think Effie might have a line of dialogue about like, hey, normally when we have a volunteer, there's a process to these things. That got cut, but yeah. Apart from that, very, very faithful.
Yes, and I like the contrast. Like it's a lot of emotion when Katniss volunteers, and
Hmm.
then it kind of like dies back down and Peta's called, and there's kind of a change in the music where you can see again Jennifer Lawrence's acting skills phenomenal. You can see the realization of who Peta is to her, and we get little snippets of the flashback to the bread scene. No, actually, I don't think
Hmm.
we do at this point, do we? Um,
We might get
I
like
think that comes
one really brief
later.
one.
Okay, but you can see even when his name is called, you can see Jennifer react to that.
Hmm.
And I know in the book we get the information about like they, growing up, and she doesn't. I don't remember if she goes into the bread story at this point or not. I don't think it was needed for the film for that. I like how they added to the flashback each time we saw it, and then we
Agreed.
finally get the whole story. But seeing that she does have a reaction to Peta's name being called, I really appreciated in the film.
Yeah, I agree. And again, like I think that whole sequence is pretty faithful in terms of like, yeah, we have no idea who PETA is until that moment. And that's just like it is in the book. It's like, oh, there's this,
Hmm.
new name to consider, and then we get kind of the backstory there. But I think one of the moments on screen that I wish there was a little bit more is when Effie asks for applause for the volunteer,
Mm.
and they don't applaud. They give the three-fingered salute.
Yes.
And you see a little bit of a reaction from Effie, but in the book they do a much better job of like describing like this is something that like the viewers in the Capitol would take as like a sign of defiance. And like I found myself like wishing, I
Right.
was like, I wish we got like a couple of like just changes in perspective, like maybe got to see the Capitol like viewing this on a screen or something like that to give us an idea that that was happening. But yeah.
Right. And we'll get to it later, but we do have another scene with the three finger salute when Rue
Yes.
dies and
Hmm.
District 11 does the salute. Although I don't think in the book they actually would know that salute. I think it's a District 12 thing.
I believe so.
Um, but we get that, we know that this is an emotional, respectful gesture. And then
Right.
of course in the film we get to see the rebellion that happens in 11 immediately after that.
Right.
So I think we get that visually. We get the we understand visually in the film what that gesture
Hmm.
means, that she's not able to explain in the
Yeah,
in the
I
film
agree.
earlier.
Eventually, we get there. Just like kind of in the moment, I was like, "Yeah, I wish this had a little bit more oomph behind it." But we get there. You're
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
I get that.
yeah.
See, for me, music is what really gets me emotional. The music adds to what the story is telling, and music really gets me. And I think
Hmm.
this moment, well, it hits for me because of the
Oh yeah,
music, and it just
yeah.
everything kind of silences out, but that orchestra music in the background, and
Mm,
you see Katniss kind of reacting to it as well.
for sure.
Um, but I do, yes, we do get more information on that in the book, of
Right.
course. So let's fast forward to training and capital life. Well, actually, let me back up. Let's talk about the train ride.
This is where we get introduced to Haymitch, and
Yes.
the introduction is very different. In the book, he is throwing up on himself. They basically have to pick him up out of his own vomit to take care of him, but they don't go that route in the book. But I think that's okay. They still effectively, and I talked about this in the previous episode, but that's where it comes down to Woody Harrelson's performance. Like, he really
Hmm.
does lay everything just like within a few exchanges and a few minutes into that scene, you kind of get everything that you need to know about him. um, so yeah, I thought, and everything that you brought up in terms of like the train sequence is really kind of the first time that you get to see the stark contrast and get to see
Yep.
those expressions on Peeta and Katniss's face, that they're in a totally different world now. Yeah.
Yes. Going back to Haymitch, the next morning we meet him, and then everybody storms off, and then we fast forward to the next morning, and Katniss sees him and Peeta discussing the games and strategy,
Hmm.
which did not happen in the book. He was a lot more reluctant in the book, and like you said, a lot more not even able to have these conversations because of the alcoholism. So that was an interesting change in the film, to have him be sober, hungover, but sober in the train and talking to Peeta in that way.
Hmm. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember that the film ever explicitly points out the fact that he was a survivor. Do they? Like, I think they just refer to him as mentor.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna have to go rewatch myself, because
Sorry.
they know. That's a good point, because I mean, I think we as viewers know that he was a tribute, but I don't know when we get that information.
Right.
They must say it on the train at some
I
point.
Yeah, I think there is a passing line of dialogue, because I just feel like the adaptation would not, that would be a huge oversight if that was the case. But certainly they don't spend a ton of time on it. But again, with his like first pieces of advice, like just kind of accept that your death is imminent.
Mhm.
Again, that kind of shows like the built up callous. Like, he's done this so many times and seen so many kids die. Like, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. And that's,
Hmm.
yeah, I do wish they had spent a little bit more time on that fact in the film. But again, I think Woody Harrelson portrays the, really, how do I describe Haymitch? um, just over it.
Yeah.
He's heartbroken.
Yeah.
He's been heartbroken. What happened to him after his victory, and then every year watching these tributes die. So
Yeah.
he's hopeless
Until he's not.
until he's not. And that's another thing, is Peeta's mom in the film is the one that says we might finally have a Victor, and she wasn't talking about me, Peeta says.
Right.
So they're finally seeing something in Katniss.
Hmm. And that's an example of like a line lifted right out of the book.
Yes,
She wasn't talking about me.
right. Ugh, poor
Poor guy.
Peeta. So we arrive at the Capitol, and in the book, we spend a lot of time talking about the makeovers and getting their first impressions of the Capitol people and
Hmm.
particularly their hair and makeup, their prep team. That's what they're called. Their prep
Okay.
team.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Now, in the film, the prep team is present. They don't have many lines at all, if any. So, do you think that it would have been nice to see the prep team a little bit more?
Sure, it would have been nice, but I think they served their purpose in terms of like what we needed to get from them in this adaptation, right? A lot of Katniss's, like in the novel, her take on them is like, I think she refers to them as like a trio of pets, like birds, like they're kind of like squawking and flurrying about her, and that's effectively what
Mm-hmm.
they do in the one scene that they're really given. So I think it works. I don't think I needed all that much more from them. It would have been nice to see Octavia somewhere in the background, just because they describe her of like having dyed all of her skin like a shade of green. Like that would have
Mm-hmm.
just been kind of cool to see, and just like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I recognize that, but it wasn't anything that I was like super missing.
Sure. And I think I might be remembering some stuff from future books. So forgive me
Oh,
again for
okay,
getting
sure.
too ahead of ourselves. Um, but I do think they see in the film, to me, they just seemed like more of a medical field uh
Okay, I think that's okay.
setting.
Yeah.
And very much not interested in being there. Like they were more interested in each other. And like I know that she
Okay.
talks about them gossiping a lot in the book, but I feel like the book really gives them more agency in the sense that they're proud of what they're doing and like they like their roles in making this person presentable.
I think that's fair because, like, with everything that I said, where Katniss does like look at them kind of like pets, there is like some kind of fondness. Like, I even think she has a line where she's like, "It's kind of like if you come home after like a really tough day and you've got like this trio of like little animals or whatever." So she does have
Mm-hmm.
some level of fondness, and to your point, I do think that comes from the fact that they are helping her because they take a certain level of pride in what they're doing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what I think I miss from the film. But
I think that's fair.
they
Yeah.
they kind of give all of the prep team into Cinna and Peta's
Mm.
prep team into I forget his main person's
Portia,
name, Portia.
Portia. Yeah.
And she's there. I think it's Portia in the audiobook.
Hmm.
She's there, but not no speaking lines, I don't think at all. But
Not a
she's
one.
present in the film. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, I think it would have been nice out of all of the characters that are cut or pared down. I think the prep teams are what I miss the most.
Okay. Yeah. I did not feel that way initially, but the points that you raise are valid points, and I can totally see where you're coming from.
Thank you.
Hmm.
After we're all prepped and ready to be presented to the Capitol, we first have to train and have our assessments. Again, I thought this was all pretty well done. I mean, we didn't spend more time than we needed. We didn't really cut anything we didn't need to cut. What do you think?
I agree. I didn't like as I was watching the film, no qualms with it whatsoever. Thought it was a pretty faithful adaptation. Thought they made some nice choices in terms of like that particular exchange where Katniss gets to tell Peeta like, "Hey, you need to throw that thing," and like they're looking at you like a piece
Mm-hmm.
of meat, like an easy target right now. You need to do something. I appreciated that moment. In retrospect, just kind of thinking back on it, I think that would have been a nice place to maybe give us a little more time with some of the other tributes because, and to
Mm,
be fair, in the book we do not get all that much, but again, being in Katniss's mind so much, we get a little bit about what she thinks about Foxface and some of the other
mm-hmm.
tributes. Like that could have been a nice place to do some of that, but again, it's not a major qualm at all.
Sure, I agree. Even if it was a little bit of dialogue between Katniss and Peeta, giving them the nicknames, like I don't want
Sure,
to know their names because I don't want to have attachment to them. Like
fair,
I've killed
fair,
animals, I've never killed people.
yeah,
So not knowing their names and calling her Glimmer and Foxface. And then of course I think that would highlight the relationship she has with Rue later on.
sure, sure. I mean, they do have the moment like you have a shadow, and then she gets to like
Mm-hmm.
Rue gets to like take the knife from Kato, which was a great moment, which I don't think was in the book. But yeah, I think of like
Right.
a character like Thresh. Like if they had some passing acknowledgments, like I think that would have made. And again, these are just minor gripes. Like I think this is a
Yes,
really
yeah.
great adaptation, but it's just like, yeah,
Hmm.
on the page we get so much more from Thresh than we get in the movie. So I do think like that
Yes.
sequence could have been a nice place to do little things.
Yeah, absolutely. So yep, we have our assessments. Now we're on to presenting everybody to the Capitol and really getting ready to enter the games. So we have our interviews with Caesar Flickerman, and this is when PETA announces his little secret.
Yeah. Can I backpedal just a little bit? And
Absolutely.
I think they kind of feed into each other, like going into the interview. But the choice with Katniss, firing her arrow into the apple in the pig, where
Yes.
the game makers and potential sponsors are in the book, they spend a lot of time on her like fretting and like crying and being really tortured about that decision and the impact that might have on her loved ones. And the
Hmm.
movie does not
Oh,
do that at all. It's
yes.
like she's instantly getting accolades. She's already laughing about it, and everyone's like, "Whoo, girl! Like, I can't believe you did that. I'm so proud you did that." And Effie is kind of the one like, "Oh, I don't know if that was a good idea."
Right. And then
So
we open
yeah,
that scene with Effie going in on her, and even
yeah,
Cinna like is like, "Ugh," and Effie shuts him down. And then when Haymitch comes in and gives her the thumbs up is when she's like, okay, I kind of feel relieved. But I do agree
yeah,
having a little bit more of a contrast would have been nice.
yeah. But yeah, that does go right into the interview, kind of her state of mind and how she's feeling, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I thought the
So yeah.
God, sorry.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
But just in terms of the interview, the depiction of the we haven't really talked about. We talked about the costuming and makeup team, but in terms of like the actual outfits and how they're adapted and put to screen, like this was one of my favorite ones. Like this dress and the way that it functioned with her twirling and like igniting, like that is exactly how I envisioned what was written on the books. The black leotards from the chariot opening sequence, not so
Yeah.
much. Like they work, but they're a little different than what I imagined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The costuming, this whole movie is with the Capitol, especially getting the visual that Suzanne Collins writes onto the screen. I really think they nailed it. And like all the costumes and the hair and the makeup and just even the set design, it's just phenomenal.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, they really capture that out of touch Capitol.
Yeah, yeah, very much inspired by like the Roman Empire, but also obviously influenced by the modern day.
Yes. Um, so do you have anything else to say about the actual interviews and how, the dialogue between Peta and Caesar and Katniss and Caesar and then the aftermath of that?
Yeah, I did think I appreciated the fact that we actually got to see in real time Peta and Caesar sniffing each other. Like that was just something like you kind of heard like Katniss refer to, but actually watching it happen in real time was pretty funny. And then yeah, the emotional reaction from Katniss afterwards, where she shoves him. I am kind of glad that they didn't do the whole thing where she knocks him down into the ceramics and he cuts his hands and everything like that, because I feel like that's a little
A little
overkill in
dramatic.
that.
Yes.
That is one of the things that endeared me to Peta in the book, because like I remember the specific line where she comes to the conclusion and the recognition, like he has done me a kindness. Like Haymitch says,
Mhm.
he's made you more desirable. He hasn't made you look weak. He's made you more desirable. And she says something, or she thinks something to the effect like, I have answered his kindness with injury. And
Mm,
so that did, in the book, that did warm me up to Peta. But in this instance, I think it was kind of the right choice for the for the scene. We don't need to have bloodied up hands right going right into the games.
sure. Yeah, definitely. Um, Let me ask you, what was I know you saw the film first, but what was your first impression when you saw Peta with the careers?
Yeah, watching the movie the first time around, I'm trying to put myself back into that headspace because, but
I
I
know,
will
it's been
admit,
some time.
even like how I reread the book this time before I rewatched the movie, and when I read the book, like that was a moment that I had kind of slightly forgotten. So when she's up in the tree and like hears him for the first time, and it's like I recognize the voice, it was Peta, and the chapter ends on that note, and it's such a gut punch. Like it does work. In the movie, it works as well, but I feel like just like by way of editing and moving on to the next scene, it's not as effective, just
Mhm.
because we don't get like that prolonged reaction from Katniss, or like, you know, really feeling screwed
Yeah.
over or betrayed by him. It's just kind of like, okay, this is the situation. Got to keep pressing on.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the benefit of books is being
Oh,
able to
always,
see that
always.
internal dialogue.
Yeah. What about you? How did that moment hit you though? I'm curious.
I don't remember.
Okay.
So the book, let me scroll back up here, came out in 2008. So yeah, that's a very long time ago. But I'm sure, and like you said, okay, the chapter ends on that, right? And that is the reason why I could not put this book down, because every single chapter was a cliffhanger,
Oh
every
yeah.
single one. And I'm like, well, I can't stop reading now. Like, I've got to know what happens next. Like, what?
Yeah.
Peeta's with the careers? No, this can't be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sure at that time I was shocked and needed to keep on reading.
And as I'm contemplating and thinking about it a little bit more, I can't help but kind of like put myself in the position of the book more so than the movie. But the book especially does just such a great job of like, at that point, you really don't know what his alliances are. Like, this makes sense. Like, he has all the way along the way been voicing his doubts. And in every instance where Katniss succeeds, you know that's kind of a mark against him. Like, the fact that she gets an 11, that's when he decides like, hey, we need to separate our training
Mm-hmm.
here. And so yeah, they do a really good job of like, you really never know whether or not you want to trust Peeta. He's the boy with the bread, right? But he also wants to
Yes.
survive and get home and to see his family. So
Sure.
yeah, it's really well
Yeah.
done.
And you just mentioned the 11 and then Peeta not wanting to train with her. And in the film, when Haymitch mentions that, and he's like, this happens from time to time, you can really see the hurt on Katniss's
Mm,
face. And
absolutely.
just kind of like, not so much a betrayal, but kind of like the just shock and like, okay, I thought we were in this together, but I guess
Right.
not. Okay. Any final thoughts on everything up until this point before we get into the arena?
No, because
Okay.
are we gonna have? Sorry, are we gonna have another opportunity to talk about like excluded characters and stuff like that?
We can do that now.
Well, I guess this is a good point to do it at, because the Avox. The
Yes.
Avox was a
Mm-hmm.
big exclusion. So, and I feel like um, all the way up until her entering the arena and going into the games, like the Avox was kind of like this recurring figure in her life in the books, in the book rather. So that was something I missed a little bit, but again, in terms of like the adaptation, that's a lot of world building and have to do, and that would involve like an extensive flashback sequence as well. So I get why it wasn't in there.
Yeah, and going back to our theme discussion, our key themes from this book is that sense of rebellion. And it's not a huge theme of this particular book because that's not where Katniss is at the moment, but
Sure,
there's the seeds of rebellion that are being planted throughout this entire
absolutely.
book. The first one is her volunteering for Prim, which is
Mhm.
not really a rebellion. Like, that's a thing that is allowed to happen. The careers actually want to do that.
Right.
But that's the first time that's ever happened in District 12. And so
Mhm.
that's that first kind of like her heroism showing,
Mhm.
and the fact that she's brave enough to do something like that for something that she cares about. The Avox is another symbol of the rebellion, and they know that they know each other from before, but they don't mention it, and they know that they shouldn't mention it, and they have this sort of secret between the two of them. um
Mhm.
and then they, that's the second sort of hint towards Katniss's role in this story. And
Okay.
it will be, I think there's more to that, their relationship later on in
Okay.
the trilogy, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Well, at the mention of the Avox, it's also another opportunity. Like in the book, when she first mentions recognizing her, everyone's like, "What? There's no way you could recognize her." And Peeta comes to her rescue again. So it's like you don't get as
Yes.
much of that in the movie, but there are multiple instances where Peeta comes to the rescue and kind of shows his care or does things to the benefit of Katniss. Like you do in the movie,
Yes.
you get the great. I love the chariot race for the fact that like it really does make a point to emphasize the fact that it's his idea to raise their
Hmm.
hands up in unison, and like what a great reaction that gets from everybody.
Hmm. Yeah, and again, talking about planting seeds, that's him planting seeds that he wants her to make it out alive. He doesn't have any hope for himself, but he's going to make
Hmm.
sure she does.
For sure. For sure.
Hmm. All right, let's talk about the arena and the games and our
Okay.
first look into the arena.
For sure.
What were your initial thoughts? Well, I guess tell me, because you saw the movie first, so you kind of already had a visual. So when you read the
Yes.
book, did you think that the movie really did a good job of making the arena come to life from what the book was saying?
Absolutely. Again, not to sound like too much of a broken record, but I do think they nailed it. Outside from the cornucopia being gold in the book, it's
Yes.
silver in the adaptation. But apart from that, I thought the way they chose to depict it, the landscape. I don't recall that we spend too much time around the lake, or that the lake is ever like mentioned
Even
as a
there.
major
Yeah.
geographic feature in the book, but not a major deal for me in terms of like the topography and the environment. Yes, it's like a rocky but
Mm,
wooded, somewhat mountainous terrain. Yeah, they nailed it.
yes. And I really like the the opening. We come up to the arena, she sees the bow and arrow, and glances at PETA, and he just slightly shakes his head no. And like that
Right.
just really, really was brought from page to screen really well.
Yeah.
That whole opening sequence of the cannons going off and her trying to get the bow, but it's just not working out, and then she just grabs a pack and skedaddles.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that whole sequence is referred to as the cornucopia bloodbath, in which we
Yeah.
lose like half of our tributes right
Oh,
there. The
yeah.
film makes a choice to do that entire sequence with like an omission of sound. Like it's all
Yes.
silence to kind of contribute to the disorientation, which I think works, but it also has the added benefit of um, we're seeing some pretty gruesome things on display, but this movie also manages to keep it at a PG-13 rating. So I think
Mhm.
the like lack of noise and sound design kind of helped with some of that. But yeah,
Yes.
certainly a slaughter, and you feel that. Like I remember the first
Yes.
time I watched the movie in 2012. That's kind of like I was already enjoying the movie for the world building and the character development, but that was kind of like when I shot forward in my seat and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is the ride that we're in for."
Right, because you're told that 24 kids are going into this arena and only one comes out. You're
Hmm.
told that, but it doesn't really hit you until you
Hmm.
start seeing them, even in the training and even in them having the conversations, even between PETA and Katniss, saying, "You're like she wasn't talking about me. You're the one that's going to make it." You don't really grasp that, and it doesn't become a reality. And probably for the tributes themselves, it doesn't really hit them until they step foot in the arena.
Well, sure.
Um, but yeah, they did a really great job of portraying that sense of chaos.
Yeah. Now, I did read an anecdote. I think it was from one of the writers, and they said they thought about making a change to the film adaptation, which I kind of would have liked to see. And like, if they did like a deleted scene, I think it would be pretty cool. But in the book, Katniss has the anecdote about in a previous year they had someone that stepped off the pad too early and hit one of the
Yes.
mines, and they had to
Uh-huh.
scrape them off. They talked about doing
Ugh.
that in the film adaptation just to show. And
Yeah.
obviously, they probably would have, used kitty gloves in terms of the gore. But I do think that could have uh, I think that could have like helped do some of the world building and establish like why they were
Mhm.
standing on those circles and stuff like that. It would have been. I struggle to say cool to see, but I would have appreciated it on some level.
I wonder if they will add that to the Sunrise on the Reaping.
Oh, okay,
Even the book, like maybe that happened during Haymitch's games, and then we'll
sure,
see that on film.
could be.
Because if I remember correctly, Haymitch's games are very brutal.
Okay,
So I can see. I'll be surprised. I'd be interested to see what this is rating. I don't remember what Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was rated either, but
I
because
think they
this
all
is
shoot
I.
for PG-13.
So it'll be interesting to see what or I'm sorry, what the Sunrise on the Reaping is going to be like, because I really anticipate this book being a really brutal book based on the little bit of dialogue we get in this trilogy about what Haymitch went through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'll be able to handle it.
Oh no.
But
Yeah.
I will read it and I will watch it because I do really love this world that Suzanne Collins has written.
Yeah. While we're on the subject of this kind of like opening sequence to the games, I will say I think one of the benefits to this adaptation is while I did speak to the disorientation and kind of just like the utter chaos we're seeing on display,
Mhm.
I think the film does a better job of kind of like um, letting us see the impact of this bloodbath, because in the book it's all from Katniss's perspective again, so
Right.
we really don't know how many people were lost until like that night when she gets to hear. I mean, I think she hears the cannons and has some idea, but it's not until that evening when you see the names and faces
Right.
displayed on on the sky that she gets to understand. But in the film, like right there, you're like almost instantly, it's like they just lost like the majority of the, well, not the majority, but a good portion of the
Yeah.
competitors.
Right. And I think that's what happens in a lot of the games is that initial bloodbath
Oh yeah.
loses a good chunk of the characters.
I mean, what would you do in that situation? Would you go for the gear or would you just hightail it? The temptation to go for at least one pack of gear would be there for me. I'd be honest. Like,
I really have no idea how to answer this. I want to say that I would be
sorry to put you
brave.
on the spot.
But no, I really think that I'm a scaredy cat and I would run the other direction. And I would
Well,
try to
maybe you'd have
survive.
someone that would volunteer for you.
Yeah, no. I don't know how far I would make it in the Hunger Games, but I really want, like, I don't like camping. I guess it would
Okay.
depend on the arena. And what arena I'm
Sure.
being thrown into. And what tools I have at my disposal. But I do not think that I am strong enough to fight people off at the cornucopia. I think I would take my chances and run the opposite direction and then figure out what I have with what the arena has for me.
Yeah, yeah. Not to tangent too hard, but I do think it's an interesting discussion. And I just think like I'm
Yes, please.
pragmatic enough of a person. Like I weigh the pros and cons. It's like, yes, there's an inherent risk to going for some gear, but it's like, say I go for the gear, I manage to get it and get away. At least like I've got like 2 to 3
Something.
days of survival where I'm not like left completely bare. Where I could go for it, get killed instantly, and then that's it. Or I go for it, or I just don't go for it at all, and then I'm out in the woods for like 3 days just starving to death, which would be pretty terrible. I would prefer to die quickly.
Now that I've thought about it a little bit, I think I am going to run, but I'm going to really bank on getting sponsors and trying to figure out how I can really tug on their heartstrings and get me to give me some goodies. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. That was a really fun tangent to go on. I've never thought about that question before. Listeners, please write in and let us know what you would do if you were in the Hunger Games. But getting back on track now, I want to keep talking about the arena. And we've kind of talked about our initial impressions, but if there's anything you want to talk about before we start talking about Rue and our alliance with Rue.
Okay, yeah, I think the one thing that comes to mind before we get to Rue is in the book. Like I remember in the movie they mentioned dehydration. I think they say like 20% of you will die from dehydration, but in the book, dehydration is just such like the biggest obstacle Katniss is facing in those first few days because, like we talked about, she makes that decision to go for a piece of gear, but Peeta and Haymitch have instructed her don't do that. Like go for a source of water. So movie doesn't really do that, but she's got plenty of obstacles to face anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I do want to mention her internal dialogue during that scene and saying like, why isn't he sending me water? And then she's like,
Right.
it's a game to him. Like I need to do something for him to reward me. And then she finally figures out what he wants her to do. Or I think it's actually, she knows he's not giving it to him. Haymitch is not giving her water because that must mean she's close.
Right.
He knows she can do it.
Right.
And she makes that realization. And that would have been nice to see in the film somehow. I don't know how, because you can't, talking to herself out loud, you can't do that. You can't talk in the arena. Somebody will find
I'm
you.
really thirsty. Wish I had some water. Like it doesn't work so well.
So I don't know how they could have portrayed this in the film,
Right.
but to see that see them communicating without communicating in the film would have been nice to see somehow.
Yeah. And I guess as we get towards Rue, this is kind of like the kind of preamble to the partnership with Rue, but I do want to talk about the Tracker Jacker sequence because I talked about how the cornucopia bloodbath did some things to make that a little more palatable, but the death of Glimmer and seeing her bloated body, they do not do the full, things that are described in the books in terms of what Katniss has to do to get that bow and arrow free from her grip. But in terms of showing us that bloated corpse, I was kind of like, "Whoo!" That's tough to see, but I'm kind of glad that they went there.
Yeah, I agree. And it just shows the violence of the arena and what the Hunger Games are.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we talked about it on the last episode, but that was a great opportunity to utilize the character of Caesar Flickerman to great effect. Like he's
Yeah.
providing that commentary, he's providing that exposition, giving us the backstory on Tracker Jackers. And then as I was watching the movie, I was like, I could not remember. I was like, are they going to depict the hallucinations at all? And I'm so glad that they did. Like
Yes.
we don't
Yes.
get the
And
eyes boring, the ants boring into her
yes.
eyes, but it's still there.
Well, and another thing that I thought was really well done is PETA coming up and saying, "You got to run, you got to run." She doesn't remember if that was really him or if that was a hallucination. And
Oh
I
yeah,
thought
good
that the
point.
way they filmed that, how it was like blurry-ish, that depicts like, okay, this could be a hallucination. And that's not something you would know from the film, but as a
Hmm.
reader, you would be like, oh, that's the hallucination effect. She doesn't know if that's real or not.
For sure. And then when she's in her fever dream, it's a good opportunity. I don't think the book does it, but the film uses it as a great opportunity to do some of those flashbacks, and that's where we get to learn more. Like they
Yes.
never flat out say this is what happened to her dad, but you're able to like use visual
Yes.
context to understand, okay, this is what happened. And she has that moment where she's like laying into her mom, like, you don't get to tune out, you can't tune out again, like you need to be
Mhm.
here. And to transition to like that being PETA, like it just worked really well. Great editing
Yes.
there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. So yeah, let's talk about Rue because Rue is the
Hmm.
one that kind of helps her through the tracker venom. And then
Absolutely.
they form this alliance.
Hmm. Hmm. So very faithful adaptation again. The fact that she's not even aware that Rue's around until she sees her in the tree pointing to the nest. And
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I just really liked seeing their relationship play out on screen. Again, a lot is cut, a lot of dialogue, a lot of internal
yeah,
dialogue. But we needed to, we can't have a 5-hour movie.
right.
So I do think what they did keep in the film was fine. We were able to understand that they formed a really good relationship. And I
Hmm.
think that Jennifer Lawrence really gets across that she has a sisterly love for Rue,
Hmm.
especially with the funeral.
Yeah, yeah. That moment where she lets out like the guttural cry after Rue's passing, like really hit me. And yeah, her basically doing that for District 11, and I know in the book she receives the bread, and says,
Yes.
I, my thanks to District 11. And that was the one of the moments in the book like that really got me in the book, because you get the full exploration. She's like, what did this mean for these people to band together to get me this loaf of bread, someone not
Yeah,
from their
like what
district? Like this is kind of unheard of to do this. So
yeah.
just the gravity of that gesture was not lost on me, and really hit me in the book. And it was one of those
Mhm.
moments like I like the direction that they went in the movie, because I think they needed to. Um, but I would have liked to just have that bread moment, I guess.
Yeah, and I think what they gave us instead was the rebellion and the
Yes,
shots
yeah,
of District
absolutely,
11,
absolutely,
and
yeah.
I do like that they did that for her, and I would have liked to see that, but being a movie and you need the drama, and I think that that really got across. There's the same feelings that they respected her and they were mad that this is happening to their children. I mean, Rue is 12 years old.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. And in the book, we find out that she's the oldest sibling. That's why there was nobody there to
Yeah.
volunteer for her. So that's even more heartbreaking to think like she's got
Yeah.
however many younger siblings that aren't going to have her to come home to them. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Ugh. Well, let's move on to something
okay.
less sad. Well, actually, I do want to note my comment earlier about planting the seeds of Katniss being rebellious.
For
This is
sure.
another moment where she is being rebellious without realizing she is. But that is what gives her the power to be the Mockingjay later on. Is this is another, and this is not only is this a seed, but this is a seed that is being seen across all of Panem.
Right. And the choice to make a funeral for her is an open act of defiance. She knows that the Capitol's not going to like that this humanizes Rue, that this makes them face up to the fact that they've just been complicit in the murder of a 12-year-old girl. So it does take me back to and I'm glad they included it in the movie, but the scene with Peeta and Katniss on the rooftop where he gets to tell her, like, I don't want these games to change me. And this is the moment
Yes.
where that starts to make sense to her. Like, now I finally get what he means. Like, this is my opportunity to stand up. And yeah, planting those seeds of rebellion. Absolutely. This is like her first open act of defiance. It's all been survival up until this point, but now she's
Yep.
kind of realizing that she has tools at her disposal.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, okay, this is the end of an alliance for her, but they have the Capitol has now, the game makers, I should say, have now announced that they're going to change a rule. This is the first time in history they've ever changed rules during a game, and a district can now have 2 winners. So now she realizes, well, I've lost one ally, but I still have one, and that's Peeta, and she needs to go find him. And then she finds him by the river, the lake, right?
Correct. Yeah, she almost steps on him.
Yes, and this is the introduction now of the Star-Crossed lovers, and how they are back together.
Yes. Yes. Again, I think largely very faithful in its adaptation. We even have the sequence where she's kind of following the stream because she knows he has to be near a source of water. That's the only way that he'd be surviving. And she sees the blood smears and kind of tracks him that way. And I felt like the film was really effective and like they capitalized on that opportunity. Like, hey, let's show some of Katniss's like tracking and hunting skills
Yes.
here, which, you know, in the book, you got that by just getting to spend more time with her when she was in District 12 in the forest. But I did appreciate that that sequence for showing those skills on display.
Mm-hmm. Great example of show, don't tell
Absolutely.
in the visual medium. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I feel like pretty quickly from there, they're kind of in the cave where
Right.
in the book, I know they spend an extensive amount of time together. And that's kind of
Yes.
where we really do get this fledgling romance starts to really take shape, at least for Katniss.
Yeah. Well, I would say for Peeta, because Katniss, I think, still thinks of it as an act.
Yes, yes, and no. Yes, especially earlier on. Like I think she's like bargaining. She's using her kisses as like leverage to get like the broth, and then
Yes.
later on the medicine to put him to sleep. But um, there are some moments like in the film. I remember I can't remember exactly what he says, but she gives him a really warm and genuine smile, and I was like, okay, this is one
Right.
of the first times she's like genuinely warming up to him. But in the book, I know they like do such a good job of like describing like the safety that she feels in his arms, like a safety
Yes.
she's not felt since her dad. So yeah,
Yeah. I just think that her guard is still up in the
for
book,
sure,
and she's
for sure,
not really willing to admit feelings for him because it is still the games and they still need to make it out of here. She's still just very tactful, or not tactful, but still planning what needs to be done to make it out of here.
sure.
And I don't think that she realizes what the feelings are for him until
Hmm.
later on. And
Yeah,
right now it's just that he's home. We're allies. We need to get out of here. I do think she genuinely has feelings for him and cares for
sure,
him. I
sure,
just
sure.
think that it's still much more planning, how are we going to get what we need and how are we going to make it out of here alive? And those are, you know, that's at the forefront of her mind.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong, and I think that is just another you know, area where the book gets a few more opportunities. Like, I think about when they're in the cave together and really like first warming up to each other. Like Peeta is kind of like the instigator in terms of saying like, you know, you can kiss me whenever you want. Like
Yeah.
I'd welcome a kiss anytime. And in the film, it's more Katniss. You know, she's the first one to kind of plant a kiss on his cheek and everything like that. But one of the things in the book that I really loved and kind of again, like as I'm mentioning, just kind of like, you know, these little differences, and I wouldn't even call them gripes. It's just like, you know, just noting the differences. But in the book, one of my favorite things that they do, just being in Katniss's head, is anytime she thinks about like Gale or Peeta together, she's like, ooh, they don't mix well in my head together. Let me like push that to the side. And you do get a sense of like she's such a mature person, but this is like the
Hmm.
one area of kind of like immaturity for her. And there's
Yeah.
a line later on where she's like, Pete is so interesting. Like he's not predictable. Like he's interesting. It's like any other time that would be interesting to me, but right now that doesn't work for me. Like I need someone
Right.
that I can predict. So I like those little asides.
Yeah, I really do like all of the information we get from Katniss's inner thoughts in the book. And there's just no way to do that for a film. So
Yeah.
I think they did well with what they had. But I would say the cave is probably some of my favorite parts of this book
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
how they survive
Yeah.
these few days in the cave
Yeah.
and seeing that relationship blossom.
I agree. And to give the adaptation some credit, I did appreciate the choice to flash back to District 12 and like show Gale's
Hmm.
reaction to some of those kisses and stuff like that, because that's all going on in Katniss's mind in the book. But that's
Yes.
just a great way to, again, to show that without telling us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Again, this is why this is one of my favorite adaptations because, yes, none of that was in the book, but you have to have a way of showing that those things that are happening in her mind, and they just did such a really great job of doing that and
Hmm.
making it more of there's going to be differences between a written book and a visual film or show,
Absolutely.
and I
Absolutely.
just think this adaptation really nailed making this a visual, and I think
Agreed.
that's another great example of how they did that.
Agreed.
So let's go ahead and move forward to the final showdown, and the final defiance. And we can talk about the Mutts a little bit and Cato's last stand. And then, of course, the last seed of rebellion of this book is the berries and her decision
Mm,
to because what the game makers do is change their minds. Oh, just kidding. You should be the winners, but we're going to make you fight to the end. And she's like, no, like, let's eat these berries, take our own lives, and nobody wins.
right. Right. Well, I guess in terms of like the way that the berries are introduced, again, another almost like word for word straight out of the book in terms of like Foxface uh,
Yes.
inadvertently falling for Peta's not trap that ended up being a trap.
Yes.
So they learn about the berries there, and then yeah, the mutts or the mutations,
Yes.
whatever they're called. I appreciated the fact that they didn't spend too much time on them in the film and did not pursue the way the book went in terms of them being like combined
Yes.
with the corpses of the fallen tributes. Like that would have been a lot to try and get across on the screen, and I don't think the CG was quite there. So I think
Mm-mm.
keeping them darkly lit and not super focused on was a smart choice in this adaptation.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the complaints I have is that I didn't like the way the mutts looked. I don't need them to look like the fallen tributes either.
Hmm.
But I think it is just a problem of the CGI of the time.
Yeah.
And they just don't, it takes me out of it a little bit. And it's supposed to be this
No.
really intense moment. And they're not that scary to me.
Yeah. And not to pivot too hard, but at the subject of like visual effects and CGI, like largely this movie does a great job with its VFX, but there are a couple
Yes.
like little instances here and there. Like I think there's like a wide shot of the Capitol where I'm okay, that kind of looks like CG from 2012, but I'll give you a pass.
Yes. We're pretty spoiled these days in
Yeah,
2025.
for sure. Yeah, but I guess as far as like yeah, this act of defiance that you refer to, again, like it's just one of those like it worked on the page, so why change anything? Like that whole sequence, apart what we mentioned from the Meadows, I think is all from the page. Like even like Cato like
Hmm.
having Peta in a grip lock and Peta saying, "Hey, hit him on his hand." So.
Hmm.
Now they are a lot more merciful with Cato's fate, which I think was a good choice.
Yes. Yes. And I remember rereading it. I mean, it was like all night they listened to him
Yes.
being attacked by these mutts. And yes, in the film, they just get it over and done with, which again, we don't have time to spend on that and like having like the time passing visual. But I agree also. I'm very glad that they were a lot more merciful in the film and just cut that short. Um, and so, yeah. So, and then I get the end of the book in the film. We return back to the capital. We have our
Exit
celebrations.
interviews. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Any thoughts on wrapping up?
Is this just wrapping up in the capital, or is this like the end of the book altogether?
Both. Well, yeah, wrapping up at the capital, and then kind of wrapping up the book and final thoughts on.
Okay. Well, that's one of the strong similarities between the book and the film adaptation is like in the book, like the last chapter, it's like, oh, I've only got 10 pages left, and it's like we just got out of the games, like what are they going to try and cover in the short amount of time? And it's kind of the same in the movie, but I think the film ending actually works better for me. I think ending things off in a better place with Peeta and Katniss, and having them
Yes.
actually return to District 12 and get to see Prim and her mom and Gale in the crowd, like, but there's still the threat of snow. Like, we know it's not all sunshines and rainbows. The seeds of rebellion have been planted. There's still a threat here. Um, I think that just works as a better ending. Whereas with the book, um, like we've kind of said, like I just immediately want to pick up the next book because it's not that satisfying of an ending in terms of like the last thing she says is like, I think it's like something about like letting go of Peeta's hand and being afraid like the next time that she'll be able to grab
Yes.
it again, because like she has voiced, and rightfully so, she has voiced like the reality of like, hey, now that we're on the other side of this, my feelings are a little more conflicted, and he just takes that to heart, which is also understandable from his perspective.
Oh,
But it's a
yeah.
terrible place to leave the characters off. It's just like so unsatisfying. I'm like, oh, this is a crappy ending. But
We talked a little bit. I want to talk about the love triangle of it all because we talked a
sure.
little bit earlier about the the Hunger Games came out at the right time and how Twilight was also a thing, and then Divergent was also a thing. And
Hmm.
I don't think Divergent had a love triangle, but Twilight definitely had a love triangle. And love
Oh yeah.
triangles are still a trope of young adult um, literature. But
Hmm.
going back to the Hunger Games, I think Suzanne Collins. It's not the love triangle is not the main part of this story, not even in Katniss's mind. And I think
Oh
that's
yeah.
what makes it so compelling. And it's still the story is still about her and the rebellion and all of the key themes we've already talked about. It's not about the love triangle. The love triangle is just, I mean, they're teenagers. That's going to happen. And it's
Right.
just kind of there. And I think that I think that the movies did a really good job of not highlighting that as well.
I agree. Yeah, yeah. Especially with it again being so focused on Katniss's perspective. Certainly in the book, like it's not really at the forefront of her mind at all. It's only when Gail mentions like running off together and like the wanting to have kids and
Mhm.
stuff like that that those things start to come up for her a little bit. But yeah, I guess that's where I think I don't know. I feel like the movie just kind of like didn't waste any times in terms of like presenting Gail as a potential romantic interest.
Yes.
Whereas I felt
Mhm.
like the book you had to have like as we're going on that journey with Katniss, she kind of warms up to that idea a little bit
Mhm.
more and more, and that's only because there's suddenly competition in PETA. So I
Yeah.
think I came away. I'm pretty sure both times, if I'm not mistaken, when I see the movie, I feel like Gail's a better fit. But when I read the book, I'm Team PETA.
Okay, in this particular segment of the trilogy.
In this particular segment of the trilogy. And from what I remember, I think I may be Team PETA like all the way through, but don't quote me on that.
Yes. I can't remember who I originally I'm sure Gail was probably my original team when I first read The Hunger
Sure.
Games, but um we will talk more about their relationship, I'm sure, as we talk about the other two sequels, Kale and Katniss, Gale and Katniss. Um, but we obviously we know that she ends up with PETA, and I think that's definitely the better choice for her, even without the stuff, the key thing that happens in the future.
There's a big falling out.
I
That much I remember. Yes.
yes.
Yes. Yeah.
But even that aside, I think she would have realized PETA was better for her.
Okay. Okay. I can't remember the other subtleties of their relationship from the other books, but certainly, at least in this book, I think they present both as suitable suitors, for lack of a better term. But
Sure.
you certainly get you certainly get the feeling that, like, if life had just like taken its natural course, she would have ended up with Gale. But being
100%.
thrust into this situation is kind of what gave Peeta his opportunity to capitalize on him actually being a star-crossed
Hmm.
lover, and then
Yeah.
Katniss has to warm up to the idea. But um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's always tough when it comes to relationships because, and I feel like that's a credit
Oh,
to Suzanne
relationships are tough.
Collins. Yeah, and that's a credit to
Yeah.
Suzanne Collins' writing. She makes the characters like fleshed out and real and not without fault. And uh,
Yes.
Peeta could borderline on sometimes like feeling kind of like the perfect boy, like he's always doing good, he's always looking out for Katniss, always doing the right thing. But I think they do give him enough nuance. Like he lashes out a couple of times, like, "Hey, she's a survivor." Like in the book and the movie, like she can shoot vermin straight through the eyes and not miss.
Hmm.
She's a real contender. So yeah, I feel like I said a lot
Yeah.
without saying anything, but
No, no, no. Um, okay, so any other key, plot points that you want to discuss, or do you want to move on to our next kind of segment here?
I suppose we can move on.
Okay, so answer me this. Which medium told the story better? Or do they both succeed in their both ways?
I think they both succeed in their own right. I really do. I think this is
Yes.
one of the best examples of that.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I've already said that 1,000 times today.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
do you think that do you think there's strengths or weaknesses for each one, the book and the film, and how do they compare to each other? Or how does one fix the weakness of the other?
Okay. I guess just to talk overall about the potential weaknesses and strengths, I think one of the weaknesses that does exist in the book, and again, I think it's a great book. It's like both times that I read it, I picked it up and like could not put it down until I was done.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
while I appreciate so much that it's all told from Katniss's perspective, I think that does kind of keep the rest of the characters kind of at arm's length, and they don't actually get as much development. I think I kind of like alluded that
Mm.
to a little bit, but I was even thinking about like Senna. While he does get some great lines and exchanges with Katniss, and Haymitch too, it just feels like the warming up to them is not as earned as like it is with other characters like Peeta specifically. Um, so I think that is a little bit of a weakness that exists in both properties, but I mean, there's not a ton that can be done about that now. One of the big changes in the film adaptation that we talked a little bit about, but I think ends up actually being a real strength, is the inclusion of Seneca Crane in terms of giving
Mm.
us like a little more insight into the manipulation of the game makers and letting us see the Capitol's perspective on how this game is going down. I appreciated that, but then also giving us just like a guy to take the fall. Like I think that
Yes.
happens later on in the books. Like I definitely remember Seneca being a character in book two, at the very least, or at least we learn about his fate maybe after the
Mm.
fact. But having someone visually there to take the brunt, to be
Yes.
interacting with President Snow, to kind of have his life on the line, and to say like at the end of
Mm.
this movie, Katniss did something and it's not without consequence. Like he's got to eat these berries
Mhm.
now. I thought that was a
Yeah.
strong choice to include.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, to see the game room and to see him directing the game room is not something that we get from the books because she's there and
Mm,
we're only in her mind. But
right.
to see that and how they visualized the game room was really, really cool. And I just agree with you that having the different perspectives in the film really elevated the story.
Agreed.
So, Jay Scotty, what did you like best about the film adaptation?
I mean, what's not to love? It's just a really, really great adaptation. But overall, I think it is kind of what we were just talking about. I think in terms of really capitalizing on what you can do with an adaptation and doing what we've been talking about, showing other characters' perspective, giving us Seneca's and the game maker's perspective, but especially, and you can tell how much I love this moment by how many times I've brought it up, but I really like the way they use Caesar Flickerman's character. Like this, I was like, this is the
Hmm.
perfect way to use this character. Like give
Yes.
us that exposition and give us that commentary. And like that was kind of the perspective from the Capitol that I felt like I needed in maybe like the first third of the movie. Because again,
Mm-hmm.
like with having it all from Katniss's perspective, everything that's going down, the reaping, the train station, the goodbyes, like she's always saying like, oh, I need to stay calm, cool, and collected so they don't make sport of this, or like, it's a spectacle at the sight of
Mm-hmm.
me crying. Like you just don't get any of that in the movie until we get to the Capitol and have all that stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I really like the contrast. I like the set design and costuming
Mm-hmm.
because I like the contrast it creates in the visual format of where Katniss grew up, and even in the arena, and then the Capitol, and even the people. Like seeing Effie in the scene is
Mm-hmm.
just she's just the only color you see in that
Yeah,
scene.
sure. Yeah.
So I really like what they did there and how they managed to really grasp the essence of who and what the Capitol is.
Yeah, definitely.
What is your least favorite aspect of the movie adaptation? It's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. I think my least favorite aspect, and it's just a credit to how great an adaptation is, that this is kind of a small gripe, but I do think that by including at least one of Peta's, like either his mom or his dad or something, would have
Mm-hmm.
done just a little something to give him um, some more background and relatability and just make him feel a little more realized.
A little bit emotional. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I feel that way about the prep team almost. I
Okay.
think that's my
Sure.
biggest gripe is
Okay.
that we talked about it earlier, so I don't need to rehash that. But cutting the prep team and those characters and giving them more of a they weren't a big character in this particular book, but we don't even get them at all. Well, we get
Right.
the one scene of them prepping her, but I really would have liked to see the prep team being a bigger character in the trilogy as a whole.
Totally.
Um,
I think that's fair.
yeah. So let's wrap up the episode with what is your most memorable moment from either the book or the adaptation? What stands out to you the
Um,
most?
uh, yeah, they are things that I mentioned previously, but they're worth bringing up again. I think my
Absolutely.
most memorable thing from the book, again, is just like the couple of lines about uh, Katniss's conflicting feelings. Like again, those lines that like just that one line about like Peeta and Gale. Ooh, they don't mix together in my brain. Like it sounds so conversational. It really does sound like a 16-year-old girl, and that's one of like the few times that you get that from Katniss. So
Mm-hmm.
that was definitely one of my favorite things from the book. But in terms of one of the most memorable things from the adaptation, again, making the change from the gift of the bread from District 11 and using that as an opportunity to show the rebellion being incited, I thought
Mm-hmm.
was a good choice for the adaptation, and did a great job of like broadcasting the rippling effects that Caddis's actions are having on the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, sorry that this is kind of coming out of the middle of nowhere, but I'd feel remiss if I didn't mention it before we got out of here. But the movie does not mention District 13 at all. And the book doesn't spend a ton of time on it, but we know that there at least was a 13th district, where this isn't, it's just not even mentioned in this movie.
That's a good point. I guess they
Yeah,
wanted to see if the movie was even going to be popular
I guess
before
so.
they
I
moved
guess
into
so.
the District 13 stuff.
For sure.
Because obviously that's a big portion of the rebellion.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the movie came out before Catching Fire, the book did or not. But they might not have even known that. That's one of my biggest complaints about the Harry Potter series, is that they didn't, some of those Easter eggs they didn't put into the films because they didn't know they needed to.
It looks like Catching Fire came out in September of 2009. So she was like
Oh,
knocking
it
these
was
things
done.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, they might, I don't know.
And then, yeah, Mockingjay was August 2010. So like I said,
So
like,
they had the trilogy. They knew, but they just didn't.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, I think Suzanne Collins wrote these with the intention that
Yes.
they would be adapted. So, yeah.
Um. So I would say other than Rue's death and funeral because that always sticks out to me and it still makes me sad.
Mm-hmm.
The iconic whistle from the film,
Yep.
and also the line, that's it. The line, "May the odds be ever in your favor," and
Yeah.
even from the book and then in the film. And so that line and that whistle, just when I think of the Hunger Games, and that's more the adaptations doing, that's what I think about when I think of the Hunger Games. And then as we get later on in the series, the Hanging Tree song also is a very iconic song from
Oh,
the series. And so
sure.
I think that's what really sticks with me. Even the line, "May the odds be ever in your favor," whenever we're playing games, or even with the
Mm-hmm.
Fantasy Heroes game that I run, I always say, "May the odds be ever in your favor." So that line has always really stuck with me. And I always have to mention the music or sound effects, because sound effects and music are really what draws the emotion out of me when I'm watching something. And
Certainly.
the whistle still gives me chills to this day. So
That's a good one.
that is what is my most memorable moment. And listeners, those were our bookmarked moments. We're going to end every 2 episodes with our bookmarked moments, which is what we liked best, what we didn't like, and then what stuck out the most. So that said, Jay Scotty, thank you so much for being here with me to cover the Hunger Games. I can't wait to have you back to cover Catching Fire and Mockingjay,
For
and maybe
sure.
the prequels as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead and let the listeners know where they can follow you if you would like.
Yeah, please check me out over on Multiverse News. That's a podcast where we talk about the latest and greatest news in both TV and movie stuff. And then Animation Deliberation. That's a podcast that focuses on our favorite action animated series and cartoons. So wherever you get your podcasts, please check those out. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being my first guest, and I will see you next time. Listeners, I will see you next week with yet another book to watch with you. That's a wrap for today's episode of Book Watch. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the world of page-to-screen adaptations. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share it with your fellow book and movie lovers. If you'd prefer to watch along, you can check the show out on YouTube. You can follow the show on Instagram at Bookwatch Podcast, and you can follow me, Sarah-Daye, on Instagram at captain.mcdee. That's MCDEE. You can also join the conversation in the Bookwatch Lounge on Facebook at www.facebook.com/groups/bookwatchlounge. If you would like to support the podcast, you can join the Patreon at www.patreon.com/bookwatchpodcast. Tiers start at only $4 a month, and I'd love to have you over there. If you have a favorite adaptation you'd like to cover with me, I'd love for you to apply to be on the show with the contact form on our website at www.bookwatchpodcast.com. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and I'll see you next week.